Hello, guys.
Hello.
Getting colder here. Ah,
Yeah, raining here too.
yeah, it's weird weather today. And Mr. Thompson, I see you are in the lab.
Yep, I've got some classes that I'm speaking in today, so needed to be on campus.
Cool. Cool. Right. So I don't know if you've had a chance to see. I sent out an email saying next week we should talk about space. We are the
Not outer space, I presume.
outer space as well. That's part of it. Hello, Fabienne.
Uh,
So, yeah, well, I have Andrew and Fabienne here. Just briefly, sorry, all kinds of messages from Zoom. Um, I really think one of the things we need to work within our Sloan thing reaches across wider. And of course, we'll talk about it properly on Wednesday, but just a brief note that my perspective is it's now time to make sure the JSON is useful so we can start sending stuff back and forth.
And I am working on that.
Well, that's two thumbs and fireworks.
Well, it's like I will be working on it again once I get through the new updates I've been asked to do. It was part of this in the save system, but since I'm doing the expanding abstract now, that's taking priority. But it'll kind of be a background thing that as soon as I have free time from the other requests, I work on that.
Fabian doesn't have audio. No problem. We'll just speak on your behalf. That's easy. My name is Fabian and I supported the previous statements. Oh, he can't even hear us. That's even worse. Okay, hang on. I'm just going to
No,
get.
I can't. Hello.
Oh, no. Yeah, we can hear you.
I'm
Unfortunately, it goes
suspicious.
both ways. So I'm just removing these two note-taking things that we don't need. So yeah, okay, you have to leave in an hour, Rob. But thank you for your reply about Washington State. That's really nice. That's really good. Oh, one other thing. Hang on. It's book related, so I'm sure I'll have to repeat it in a few minutes. One second, it's on the other room.
This is too weird.
Okay. Mark, just in time for me to show a book. Yeah, right. So I picked this up a while ago. I've been reading it. It's the kind of thing you pick up at an airport, but it's actually really good. It's a bit big, but it's good. So I'm reading this stuff on sand, and there's a section on silicon chips, and they talk about the journey from really pure silicon and all of these things, all very exciting. And then they get to the process where it's in a kind of a quartz, and it's almost 1500 degrees, and they pull the silicon out as a cylinder that's about 2 3 meters tall, really gently, and all of that. So that's really cool. It's at a factory or whatever you want to call it, just literally, Andrew, 10 minutes away from where you are. It's called, forget what it's called, but yeah, just 10 15 minutes from Dini's house. So that was cool. So I emailed them and I said, hang on, I'll just briefly, hi Carl. Two things. I got an email from your friend about the symposium. Cool. And I'm mentioning this book a little bit because of the story of how silicon wafers are made. So this factory that is in Vancouver, Washington, I sent them an email saying, this looks so cool. We're a bunch of people going to have some fun in November. Could we come and have a look? And I got a reply, a guy named Ed, very, very lovely reply saying, we don't do tours. I've looked at what you guys are doing. It's kind of interesting. Maybe. If so, how many people would it be? So then I tell Dani, and Dani's like, yeah, I know these people. Of course, she knows everybody. So that was funny. So here's the thing. Cool. Do you guys want to go when we're in Washington? I mean, it is literally the substrate of the modern world, right? Got a few nods and a few thumbs. Cool. Okay. I'll say that will be. I don't know. I mean, we'll have to see. Depends on how long you will be there for. Because obviously, the symposium is on a Saturday. I'm not sure if they work weekends. On Sunday, we're hoping to slink away to some kind of a coffee shop, whoever is core. Friday we arrive. So what should we try to do? Friday or Monday for this type of thing, if it can work out?
I'm not sure the culture of that company in particular, but generally Fridays are more likely for companies to be accepting because like the work week's winding down. Um, but I don't know, maybe they're factories, so they operate full 24 hours a day. I'm not really sure.
Good point. Good point. Let me just.
You could always leave it open and ask them what works best.
I can do that. Just going to write myself a to-do item on that.
So I'm assuming with silicon wafers, it's a bit like going to the biscuit factory. Don't fill up on the uncooked dough at the beginning. Take the cookies at the end.
Oh, Mark.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not even sure. Hi, Chris. I'm not even sure. We're talking about a silicon wafer factory in Washington that we may have the opportunity to go to around the future of text. I mean, it's a crazy, crazy technology, of course. So this thing is 3 meters tall, but they cut them each piece less than a millimeter tall, each wafer. And then it spends a month in the factory being all kinds of processed. It's just crazy stuff, but I thought it would be fun to, as a kind of the opposite of what we did in Future of Text last year, which was look at the early printing in London. So yeah, that was that. So, Chris, are you joining us at the symposium in November?
I can't make it, sorry.
That sucks. Are you able to write a piece?
I think the deadline passed right. I was actually working on something and then it kind of blew up.
The deadline is next month. There was a slight alternative truth / typo on the previous webpage. And it'll all be very, very nice and not laugh at me too much. So yeah, you do have some time.
Okay. I kind of got a bit distracted and set in a different course by the everything I was writing is about AI related implications, and so all the new reasoning model breakthroughs have kind of changed a few things.
Yeah, that's of course completely fine. Yeah, did anyone get an email from me within the last half an hour on? Okay, because I wasn't sure if it's sent. Carl, I don't know if I have your email address. Could you please email me, frode@hegland.com, or put it in the chat, whatever you prefer? Oh yeah, your friend who got in touch with me, I did tell him he does have time. He is working on something, thank you. The one who, yeah, and yeah, Chris, do I have your email address? I do. Chris, did you get an email from me a short while ago?
I'll check. I haven't looked. Let's see.
Okay, I'm just adding Carl here. Apple's.
I got it.
Okay, good. Apple's contact management is not very good. Right, so how are you all feeling about space for next week? Having that as a discussion. So I'm just trying to add you, Carl, to our FOT all. Are you there already? No. Okay. Right. Right. So how is everyone, and what would you like to talk about today? Okay. Let's talk about the book then. The book should also be in XR. And since today is not Sloan Development Day, we can talk about that in a wider way. There's a few things that I think will be really, really useful. One of them would be a mural like we've had before that Brantle built. A mural that is accessible from the book, because it's one very good example of using XR space. Question, of course, is what we put on the mural. Maybe it's a timeline, maybe it's something else. But what do you guys think could be the coolest in the sense of making people think about the utility of XR for a book that we could reasonably do?
I think one of the biggest pulls for XR as far as digital text is your ability to add more interactive elements or scenery. So if I have a digital book, I can just read it on Kindle or on my tablet, on my desktop, on my phone, and the interfaces for that are fine. I have black text on a white background. I can put it in dark mode. I can flip through pages. I can read text.
Yeah.
Having it in XR allows me to have furniture, foliage, scenery that is complementary to the text that I'm reading. Or if you think about old pop-up books, you can have animated or interactive elements that demonstrate certain concepts or certain scenes from whatever you're reading. Granted, that adds a lot of technical overhead to the creation of that work. That's often multidisciplinary, 3D modeling, texturing, animation, and a bit of programming. But if you're asking like what is a strong reason to do something in XR, I think it would be that.
Good point. And also looking at Mark's point in the timeline, well, yes and no, Mark. I think potentially we could have a dynamic timeline that is rendered as a Bob Horn picture. Yeah,
But then it's not. Then it's not dynamic. That's the whole point. You're making a poster. The poster is basically a big thing. I mean, half the attraction, I think, in the discussion on the way of a timeline is it offers all sorts of affordances for exploration. If you basically just turn it into essentially a 2D poster and lay it on a space, you can have all sorts of cool interactions that we did with Bob Horn's murals, but they again were 2D rendered flat pictures. They weren't, and we looked at sort of building in fact the data back into it, but it just seems a little gain to take all the data that you have to make a timeline, then make a flattened 2D poster out of it, and then try and do interactive things with it. It's just extra work for little gain.
I hear you, but there's two things. One, we could do it flat like that, and another way, we could, of course, have it be dynamic objects on there that would change depending on what's on it. But the key thing is, I don't think we're at a point where we can do, not that you're suggesting it, everything at once. So all I'm saying is it might be useful to do different kinds of experiences that are accessible through the text. So you get to something specific, and instead of getting just a picture, you get this insanely massive wall mural. And the fact that you only have one affordance shows only one thing. Carl and Chris, just to explain briefly what this is. Bob Horn, who does this amazing set of murals that are in the real world wall size. Brendel took one of them just as an image, huge rectangular thing, and experimented with locomotion. Very easily we'd get sick walking up and around it. This is just a mural in a black room with a black floor. But then he did something that I think is quite genius. He made it so that if you pinch and move, your hand moves the entire mural. So even though it's the same as joystick walking, the brain doesn't interpret it as such, so there's no motion sickness, which was a bit shocking. So I think it really shows when some people, including Prince, say that XR is basically the same as having a big monitor. And this is a way of saying, yes, it is, except this monitor, you can lift and move anywhere you want at any time. So I'm not saying it should be the way to read the book, because for sure, even with the book just as many pages like this, it's not that useful. But if we could think of something, it could even be a high resolution photograph for crying out loud, as in just to show the interaction, just as one thing. I don't know. Yeah, exactly. Thanks, Mark.
I know when Kindle first came out and when it was getting its first sort of surge in popularity, a lot of the people I know that read as a hobby or as just a thing that they do, they read a lot of books. I had some people whose feedback on Kindle was, this is the best thing ever, because now I don't have to buy 16 more bookshelves and I can put this in my backpack and take it with me anywhere. I don't have to worry about, the only thing I still have to worry about is it getting wet, but I can take it everywhere and I've got hundreds of books in here and the storage is great. And then I had other people who gave the exact opposite reaction, which was, I can't believe anybody who reads books would ever use this, because reading off of a screen, my eyes get fatigued after X number of hours, minutes, whatever. And in addition, I don't have the sort of haptic, I'm not physically flipping pages anymore. I'm just flicking on the screen. And that for them was a big part of reading. It was cathartic to just physically turn the pages. And that could be a relatively simple add in XR, is just to be able to physically turn the page in some kind of way.
I have seen someone do that on Twitter, try to get in touch with them twice, and it was indeed cool. Yeah, that's an interesting point. I mean, I went through that. Oh, I don't need any books. Give away a lot of books, and now I buy books. It's a very different thing. Rob, do you mind speaking that? Because it's really nice to get it in addition to writing.
Yeah. Well, I've been thinking a lot about the third dimension, because it's so far we're doing a lot of moving around in sort of the medium term plane and not much using the third dimension. And I've realized that a real book is actually a three-dimensional object that you can riffle through the pages and select another page easily by flipping the corner. And why aren't we using that third dimension to do more stuff than we need to be moving things in and out, away from us and towards us, and they need to change as they move away in distance. So I've been trying to noodle about that a little bit.
Yeah, that's really important. Hi, Peter. We talked about a few things, but now we're talking about, because this is not Wednesday, this is not Sloan Development Day, but it would be fun to have a wider discussion of using our own book as an example. How can it be an XR? And one of the key things is we're not going to try to do everything in one thing. So we talked briefly about Bob Horn's mural as one thing to go in. Oh, Peter, don't worry. And then Rob, now, as you heard, opened the question of what should the third dimension be. Just want to put in really briefly that we have to make some decisions as to what XR space, because the XR space we have that Andrew's building is sitting on a chair in a 360 environment. That's very different from having the information be a three-dimensional shape that you walk around, etc. And we don't have, again, we don't have to do everything and everywhere. But when you talk about the third dimension, it's quite different in what Andrew's building, because we do have a third dimension, and we're only now trying to really figure out what is messy, what is not messy. how we layer things, and all of that stuff. So yeah, it's a really important question.
So along the axis of the third dimension, there's sort of two things. So like 2D canvas art from like the Impressionist period, a lot of people will say when they physically see it in a museum, it's a different experience because as you physically walk closer or further away from that piece, the focus, your eye, the focal length of your eye changes, and so the brushstrokes either blend or separate from each other. And so you being able to physically move closer or further from it affects how you view it. And along that same line, on a rotational axis, if you've ever seen those little plastic, scratchy, like holographic things, where if you turn them one way, there's one image. If you turn them another way, there's a second image. You could also use something along those lines to make pieces that specifically function in XR and in no other medium because you have the ability to move around them in 3 axes and also rotate them in 3 axes.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's nice that you guys write things here, but because we do transcripts of this, the chat gets a bit mostly ignored. So, in relation to what Carl just said, Chris, do you mind speaking that?
Yeah, just a random thought. As far as moving from like flat text to three-dimensional visualizations, if there were some like distance to the viewport, if there was other content that would kind of begin to emerge volumetrically out from the page or something, where you have a sense of like this is important because there's a lot of surrounding, it's like this cloud of other content that you can kind of zoom into, and then I don't know, just random thought.
I'm going to show you something on that random thoughts. So I shared this brief document with you earlier. You can see, right? So I think all of you have seen what I think, I'm going to get rid of that bar, the exciting little orange thing, right? Because you talk about zooming in and out. This is a thing that I'm so excited about, blah, blah, blah. It helps you skim. But here's the reason I'm showing it now. If I now click on outline, they show up under the headings, these orange bits. So in a way, it helps you do the zoomable, because visually here, it's all at the same level, but some things stick out visually more, not hierarchically more. So I think you are onto something. I think either annotations or otherwise, there should be different means to highlight stuff. And depending on, and highlight then, if you're zoomed out, only the highlighted stuff is shown and so on. I think that's an interesting approach. And I can see Andrew's thinking really hard about it. Or yawning, I don't know. One of those. Yeah, that's Mark, just really briefly, before you take over, because that was such a key thing. So maybe we can three-dimensionalize this. I had this idea many years ago of when you scroll a document, you're not reading. It's a different thing. You're navigating. So maybe when you scroll the document, the body text should kind of fade. Headings should be more visible. And also, if there's a product name, replace it with the company logo, and etc. for pictures of people or whatever, right? So what you're doing now, Chris, I think is saying take something like that, but instead of the moving up and down, the moving in and out to determine what is shown. Okay, that's fun. Mark, please, sorry about that.
No, it's all right. I was sort of thinking on what Rob raised and the fact that sort of getting off the sort of the almost the two-dimensional plane in sort of virtual space. So, for instance, in the collapsed document we just saw now, well, that's collapsing one axis, which is the primary linear narrative, which is to be expected because, in a sense, that's how we're used to making things. But there are probably other axes through the document. It would be interesting to be able to expand upon that. The chicken egg of all of this becomes, well, on what axes and what information do we have? And this is where things normally stop. It's the same with the timeline. We say, we'll have a timeline, but then the conversation tends to be about what sounds very close to a 2D time series implementation rather than saying we have information, we have rich information, badly scattered along a very long axis. How do we meaningfully go in and out of that? XR, with the plasticity it offers, ought to, on the face of it, offer something there. If we're just drawing a 2D graph on a very long bit of virtual string in XR, I think that's lowballing the problem. And so part of this actually comes back to thinking about the information as much as where it goes and how it looks. So for instance, what are the axes on which we might want to pull apart the documentation? Because we need to know that, because we need to know whether we have meaningful information. If we don't have meaningful information, we either have to make it or we're completely spitballing. And this is where then you end up doing a lot of expensive code design, because it turns out the code you made is really cool, but it doesn't fit the information you've got or can get. And so that's sort of, something that's whittling at the back of my mind in terms of moving beyond saying, hey, yes, we should do more, to thinking that something that's actually truly expressive and shows something that we can do in XR that we can't do broadly on the two-dimensional or 2 plus a bit plane.
I agree, but I don't think it's lowballing, because we've got to try all the balls. And also that one we kind of have. Of course, we should go further. Carl.
So if any of you are familiar with the VR game Job Simulator and its fork-offs by the same company, they do some impossible geometry in some of their user interfaces. So you may have like a toolbox that has, or like a carousel, like a cylinder that has things that you can grab off of that, kind of like a postcard rack. And you can spin that 3 or 4 times, and you can spin it 20 times, and there's a different thing on the 15th or 16th thing, when visually you should have made a full resolution and been back on the original thing by now. With, just by coding and swapping things out in XR, you can continue to populate that array as you spin that rack such that you get more things. So they did a lot of that because the majority of their experiences were meant to be done in a standing environment, not a room scale XR. And so they wanted their objects to be easily manipulatable, like a crank, a dial, a lever, a drawer, something very, very simple to interact with. But they sort of hid away the extra information along a sort of 4th dimension that just kind of crept out as you continued to interact with it in the same way. So if you wanted to do something similar for like a timeline, you could have a 3D dais that says this is the date we're on. And as you continue to rotate that dial, it continues to go further forward or backwards, even though the dial stays the same size. And just as you rotate it, it continues to populate elements further and behind wherever you are on that timeline.
To address you, Carl, and also Mark, we haven't done a real timeline based on what we have. We do have a lot of text timeline at the back of the book, which we could use. It would also be interesting to put our own articles on a timeline, because we've had a few years now. But Carl, absolutely, we should look at different dimensions. I think we all very much agree with that. Peter?
Yeah, several international expositions have used a radial design for their layout, where imagine you were starting at the center. Each pie-shaped slice going back would represent either another area of human study or another geographic area, and the depth in from the center point would give you a temporal sequencing of them. So you might start with very early instances. Most likely you'd want recent stuff to be further back, since a wedge naturally expands as it goes further back, and citations and references and things pile up over time. So that might be a possibility. And I also think we should do more playing with the in-world teleport navigation semantics that we get in the headsets, so that instead of just having it be what you can walk to or reach from your sitting position, we could also be moving around depth-wise using the teleport to bounce around in a wider area space.
Yeah, I mean, having citation views is really, really cool. And one thing that we're talking about in our production meetings for next year is annotations. I think annotations are much more than a little thing. I think we should pretend to a point that you should be able to write your own entire document using only annotations and a few filler words to connect things if you want to. So one of the issues with annotation then becomes color, highlight, and write a note. But as we, for fun, argued about Mark and me recently, if you have 3 pieces of text up there in a corner in a specific shape, might that be similar to having 3 pieces of text in a similar color in a document, meaning that in an XR environment where you put stuff is also an annotation for you? And I'm not saying it is or it isn't. I'm just trying to open up the dialogue for what does it mean to write? We're at an age where AI is just writing way too much stuff. That's just the reality, right? We're all old people here in that context, even you, Andrew, in this context, that we're familiar with writing a document. However, just like some impressionist art, Carl, you were talking a little bit about that earlier, you put stuff on a canvas. There's going to be much more AI putting stuff on a canvas, right? So if you have annotations as little anchors to things in the world, and you put that on a canvas too, that may be very powerful. So this then, of course, comes down to partly what I emailed you all today about space, but also addressability and where to put things. I think that we need to look at solving this. And just for fun, if we combine references as a citation tree, like you just said, Peter, with the challenge of a timeline, my dream, and if we can do this, I think I'll quit the industry and live on a deserted desert island or whatever, would be to be able to build a system whereby you could put anything onto a timeline and it would make sense, like it would snap onto it, but in a way that anybody can use, not as a CD-ROM demo, but as a resource, like Wikipedia is a resource for information. If we could do something like that, it would be incredible, wouldn't it? Because most knowledge, or a lot of knowledge, has some kind of time element to it. Look at Fabien, he's lost in space. In the best possible way. I'm sure you'll have some comments on that, but I would love to hear Mark's thoughts on this.
I was just going to say, I think one other challenge with the sort of time axis is I think it's there for us all, and there is a sort of presumption that something probably to the left, i.e. in our normal left to right thinking in the past, is the fact that something is to the left of something is meaningful. And I just know from the sort of timeline projects I've noodled around with that actually, funnily enough, turns out to not always be the most interesting axis. In other words, we're again are the sort of school, the things we learned at school, your nice 2D sort of long roll of paper, or done around the top of the classroom or something, makes it. It's basically the same linearity that's very much hardwired into our way of thinking about documents. But one of the really interesting things about time data is it tends to be extremely lumpy. It often has interesting segmentation in it, and so often, really, what you want or could get out of a timeline isn't drawing it on the timeline is about the most trivial thing you can do, and possibly the least insightful. Is I suppose a shorthand. I'm saying that as a deliberate provocation because we normally never get further than that. So it's sort of, I accept. I'm saying well, we could do more by doing more, but I'm well aware that actually just putting stuff on a timeline is hard. And there's very little. There's not much written about it. I've got a lot in here, and that's a whole book full of things that turn out to be vaguely timeline-ish, but not necessarily actually particularly useful. So there's a lot of really cool coding. The trouble is, there's not much insight. And that's sort of one of the things that we're setting ourselves to do, is to try and draw something out for it. It is very interesting. What's there in the future of text. Of course, it's heavily loaded to the more recent time because we're looking at it in terms of the information we have. Centered somewhat on sort of things digital, and that's obviously happened in our fairly recent past. One interesting aspect of taking a strand of maybe just a strand of the data, i.e., written about a particular aspect of it, maybe it was construction of books as opposed to how you did on-screen typography, is that whether you, for instance, want to start with a timeline that's in any way representative of actual real time, Are you looking for sequence, or are you looking for time? And I think that loops back to really where I started to say, just because something's to the left of something else, it may not be important. It might be more important that it's co-located. It's happening around the same time. The zeitgeist might link between two things that happen broadly in the same time period, maybe in different places. But maybe it's just an idea whose moment came. I see some hands up, so I'll shut up.
Rob, please, and then I have a question for Andrew and Fabienne, so prepare yourselves.
Just very quickly, I'm curious about the direction in which we think a timeline is going, because time, of course, is not a line. But the other thing is that we write from left to right, and we tend to think that the past is to the left and the future is to the right. But if we were writing in Arabic or Hebrew, it would go the other way. So, these kinds of mindsets that we have force us into certain channels. And I'm thinking if we could change the orientation of the line of time to go maybe up and down or away and behind, we might be able to shake some of the preconceptions up and have new insights. Just a thought.
Absolutely. Brandel, just to fill you in real quick, for fun today, we're talking a little bit about what we might do with our own book in XR, that cool old discussion. Right now, we're a little bit on timelines, what elements, what dimensions, and so on. I have a question that is now going to be for primarily Fabienne, Andrew, and Brandel. And the question is, what are things people have been most impressed with when trying XR with you? I'm going to start with you, Andrew, primarily based on our hypertext conference a week ago. What were the things that you felt people mostly said wow about?
Are you talking about in the context of our project or just XR in general? Because
Both.
those are different.
But they're not the same, absolutely, even though, of course, I'd love to think it was the same, but it isn't. So more in general, but also perhaps also in our environment, since our environment is more work-related and most experiences are not.
Let's see. So for first-time users, because they tend to give the best reactions. First-time users for just anything VR XR, they put on the headset, they always get shocked that their hands are being tracked and can interact with the environment. Like every time. They're like, whoa, I can grab this box that isn't really there. And I know that seems simple if you've been working in XR for a long time, but that's always the coolest thing to them. In our environment, first-time users were the most excited to see their own work, so their own papers inside the space, and being able to then even just see it there, that was cool to them. Of course, being able to do things to it was neat as well, but they mostly just brought it up and then were just looking at it and scrolling through it and stuff.
Yeah, that's really good to hear. In my experience, it is the spaces in the Vision Pro, being on the beach or being on the moon blows people's minds away. And then seeing the Super Bowl kinds of things, wow. So it is the visually immersive thing that impresses people and their own data. Unfortunately, in my experience, the interaction hasn't really gotten there yet. I haven't heard a lot of people say, beyond I can be in the room and I can move something, how interactive. We should change that. Okay, Carl, you go, and then we have Fabienne and Brandel on this one.
Yeah, so from all the VR demos I've done, the VR demos I've witnessed at conferences or done when I was working at the Army Corps, interaction is when it's very simple, like I can grab something and pick it up and move it, that seems mundane to people. But object to object interaction that they initiate, like a slingshot or a vehicle, that tends to sort of broaden people's understanding and sort of impression of the medium. And in addition to that, things like you mentioned, that either being able to see their piece of text or see a location that they're familiar with outside of the context of XR. Sort of, a lot of people don't understand how sort of easy it is to bring real world elements into a piece of software, specifically in real time, most people just don't grasp that you can do that. So when they put on a headset, it's like them going to watch a movie or going to pick up a game controller. They say this is a entirely self-contained experience. And when you show them a real world location or a real world physical piece of media that they're familiar with, that opens that knowledge, that concept to them in a way that's very easy for non-technical people to understand, is that this can reach out into the real world, this can access the internet, this can broadly do things pretty much within the limits of what you ask that it be able to do, given enough time and resources for programming. And that knowledge, that sort of concept is lost on a lot of people until you literally show it or hand it to them.
Peter, you go, but Carl, I just want to kind of say back to you, that's really, really important. It's kind of obvious to us now who's been in here, but I'm really glad you reflect on that. The fact that it isn't in a box, right? And as Tim Apple, whom I also like to call him, the whole AR aspect, we shouldn't forget about that. And I know that's not all you're saying, it's much deeper, but yeah, thank you. Okay, Peter.
Yeah, the great example that I was watching a 3D movie in Quest, and it was traveling down a canal through Tokyo. But the really neat thing was that they were also popping up little infographic callouts telling you what all the different buildings were on either side of the boat as you were going by. And that was the first time I saw one of those. It wasn't just a rendering of an environment walking through it. This was also augmented with the labels and the secondary call-out information. That just totally blew me away. I thought it's not interactive, but wow, what if it was? What if I was walking through a visualization of the Carnegie Library at Syracuse, and as I was looking at the shelves, some secondary information panels popped out at me, telling me what subject matter was being borrowed by other patrons or something like that that we could do in the headset that you don't have in the real world. But that was just like absolutely amazing. Just having that labeling come up was just tremendously impactful. And it was the first experience I ever had where I was in the environment that was amazingly high quality too. I know it's not the Apple Vision Pro, but for the 3D movies in the Quest, it's very compelling. At a few points, my brain actually forgot that I was in the headset and I wasn't actually there.
Yeah, that's a really strong point, Peter. Then I'm going to ask Fabienne the question of, I'm going to read it out again. What are the things people have been most impressed with when trying XR in your experience?
So, can you hear me all right?
Very well.
Yep.
Perfect. Thank you. So I have a little problem answering because I'm in a tricky situation where I don't really care what newcomers feel like, because it's interesting, but it's not me. Like I think pushing the medium, what VR, XR, AR is, if you stick to newcomers that are just blown away by putting the headset on, is quite limiting. So I'm just saying that, voilà, that's one of my also things that are a little bit tricky. That being said, just last week, I love to give demos to anybody who's interested, even people who are not, and then I still try to convince them to at least give it a go once, even if they hate it. I gave a demo with the Vision Pro with the dinosaur experience, which if you're not familiar with, I recommend you try it. You're basically in your living room or office or whatnot, and then you see a couple of dinosaurs that come at you gently, but still. And what was interesting is I usually do the demo and I try to make people relax with some of my terrible jokes. And I told this person that so far nobody got hurt doing that demo, which is true, but it's kind of to tease them. And yet, after I would say a couple of minutes, that person removed the headset. And it was an adult; it was not a kid. So they were really in it. So that's like, it's very, how do you say? It's I think, again, as people who go often in the headset, we forget these kind of things, but that person was actually scared. They were generally uncomfortable and had to move the headset because it's so good. And when I see this, kids and adults alike, like we discuss about very deep topic here, which is good. That's also why I'm here. But I think we must not forget that despite all the critics or limitation of interaction and whatnot, it just works. Like even if you put an old Quest One in your backpack, you toss it around, it doesn't cost much. It's horrible in terms of graphic display and whatnot, but you feel you're there. And to me, that's again, it's very basic. It's not very deep, but that's the thing that I tend to keep in mind when I give the headset to newcomers. Like, of course, I want better everything from resolution, refresh rate, the quality of interaction through hand tracking. Um, but in general, it's like for most people that I give a first demo to, I want to say it's good enough for a lot of things. It's not, again, for if we dive a bit deeper in our context here and about text. I think if we just do text, if we just to go a little bit back to your earlier question, Fraud, about the book in the headset, if we take literally a book in it and we put it in there, I've personally refused to do that because I don't think it's interesting. They're both, it's not that interesting and novel, again, in terms of like pushing the medium. Um, and it's also with the technical limitation of even if it were to be feasible, like you need such high resolution display for people to kind of be able to compare with again their basic old school screen they have in front of them. So yeah, a convoluted answer, but hope it helps a bit. At least here's my perspective.
I think it's a good answer, and yes, we shouldn't just be concerned with first-time users, but I think it is a bit grounding to have a few minutes on it. That's all I mean. Peter, I see your hand, but Randall's been waiting to give his impression of people's. Why do they go wow when they put on, of course, in your case, the Apple Vision Pro?
Yeah, so in my case, it's generally the fidelity, the fact that it is just so high resolution, and then the quality of the tracking is very, very good. And then the naturalness of an eyes and hand face input. That's something that is a little bit. You can use it. I don't know if you guys have tried much in the way of WebXR that uses of eyes and hands. Unfortunately, we don't have a solution right now for focus highlighting, the ability to be able to kind of give people indications of what their things really do, because we don't want to chip, I guess. Um, but those are the things that are the most exciting and compelling for people. And then yeah, like when they're using the web, being able to use it sort of naturally. Obviously, the tap targets are a little small in a lot of places if they're not sort of specifically designed to be taken out. But yeah, like those two things. The things that people like the most about what I built a lot of the time out of micro interactions, the idea that there's a little bit of the speed wobble on the micro on the rocket, or the way that something will sort of spin to a stop, or other things like that. And being able to really see it at the scale that it happens at, the kinds of motions are sort of actually pleasing for them. But I have to go now because I am going to catch a lift to the conference with my girlfriend.
Thanks for stopping by, and yeah, see you in a week, Brandel. We hope. Oh, Brandel,
Yes.
paper and symposium, both. Yes, you're flying up.
Yeah, yes, I will fly up for it. I'll think about what I can write.
Fantastic. Okay, I got two
Awesome.
ones to write in my spreadsheet now. Thank you very much.
Excellent.
All
All
right.
right. Yeah.
Peter, I'm going to do my spreadsheet. You go ahead, please.
Okay. I want to also mention the most disconcerting experience I had in the headset was in Asgard's Wrath 2 when I tried to walk across the tavern and the system started auto-centering me where it wanted me to be standing. And that was like really, really weird because I thought I was moving in one direction and I was being slid in the reverse direction of the direction I was trying to walk to force me to stay where it wanted me to be. And I found that being moved against my volition was really, really irksome in the user interface. Um, Another totally unrelated thought is I think we could do some interesting things playing with the temporal dimension. The sequence that we manipulate things could be meaningful as opposed to only having push the button, always do the same thing. It could be push a sequence of buttons to have a semantic value in that, or maybe have an imaginary wand in your hand so that you could touch something and it could remember the last thing that was touched when you touched something else. And basically, you could imagine your hand or whatever is touching several objects to be a stack in the fourth programming language sense and be pushing data items on that. And then we could have some other objects that would operate on whatever's on that stack that's conceptually being carried around in your hand. So, those are just a couple thoughts. I wanted to get them down on the record.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. I'm going to reverse my question a little bit now. And I'm just going to ask you, since we're having fun in this, what would really, do you think, blow someone away? Let's say we have a $1 billion budget. Let's think theater, right? We're making one assumption that it is real data because that's core of everything we try to do here. And also the fidelity, like Randall said, not just on the vision, but every time I put the headset on someone, when they see just the moon or a beach, just the fact that it's so crystal clear has such an emotional impact. And it's very much like what Carl said, it is the real world in there, even though it's not the actual world they're in right now. Right? So it is really fascinating to think about this, because what Andrew has built based on our design is the exact opposite. It's white lines, gray background, and it still works. Right? So what do you think? What would you really love to put on a friend's head and expect them to go, oh my goodness? Are you leaving, Rob, or do you have a comment, Rob?
No, I just wanted to say that I want to feed old documents to that dinosaur.
I love it.
The new, I forgot the name of that machine, like to destroy documents. That's the new way to
The
do it.
shredder.
The shredder.
That's quite brilliant, actually. Okay, Carl, go.
So, speaking from the sort of framework of traditional, like flat 2D games, there's typically three things that really sell a game for a lot of people. If you ignore things like replayability, total hours, length, etc., and that is spectacle, the execution of mechanics, and story or emotional impact. So spectacle could be audio, visual, could be animations, it could be the static assets, whether it's the scale, the colors, the aesthetics, and the score and the music plays into that. And those are typically things that scale with budget in terms of how good they are. It's not necessarily the case, but they're very strongly correlated. So spectacle and aesthetics is one. The execution of mechanics, so for certain games that have combat or thought processes, is actually learning and then executing those mechanics in order is compelling to some people, even if there's no story or they don't like the story or the aesthetics are simple. If playing the game is actually fun, then that's a big thumbs up for people. And then the last one is sort of that emotional, the storytelling aspect, and whether that emotion comes from the spectacle, from the aesthetics, or from the narrative that's being told. Those are the things that tend to stick with people the most, is those three things. So if you can pull those three things into XR, and the bigger your budget is, the more you can focus on hiring professionals who this specific niche is their wheelhouse. That is something where you'll see a lot of return.
Hang on, let's just let that sit for a bit. Can you, again, just bullet points? So story, visuals.
So the aesthetics, which is the visuals and the audio,
Yeah.
the execution of mechanics, so the actual gameplay,
Being able
and
to
then
shoot straight.
and then the story.
Right. Yeah. Okay. That was very nice to have it in that order, in that. Thank you, Peter. Hang on one second, Fabian. Please give him the link to what you've built. I'll put it up on our website so we can try it while we listen to you. Okay, if you don't mind. And Peter, please go ahead.
Okay, I was wondering if there were any experiences that have used an elevator metaphor in them in the quest. I really wanted to traverse vertically, especially like in my home environment. If I go into the cyberpunk simulation, it has that loft level up on the second level with the ladder going up to it. And I'd really love to be able to get my point of view up to that bed on the second level to look out at the room from there. And I have no idea how I'd be able to do that. I was able to slowly jockey myself out through some of the walls to be able to look at the environment from the outside looking in. Basically, what I did was I cleared the maximum diagonal strip in my living room, walked to one end, flipped my view around to be going in the reverse direction, and after zigzagging back and forth in place a number of times, I was able to get to where the environment didn't want me to be looking from, which proved very interesting. I have no idea how to move vertically.
So I can quickly touch on that. I put it in the chat, but one of the oldest demo of yours, the plank demo, it's especially fun if you have an actual physical plank, like a piece of wood in front of you, so that people can actually step on it. And how this demo, I mean, it's done a lot of times, but one of the typical way is that you go up an elevator so that people start at the bottom of the building and then they go all the way like 20, 50 stories up in order to get that. First you get time to debrief people, like don't actually jump or, because it works. And then you basically see the environment around you because the elevator is either actually, depends on the demo, but some of them, it was super cheap because you didn't see the environment change. What you saw was the number in the elevator count up. And you're like, okay, well, cheap, but it works. You don't have to make like huge 3D models. So, and it works in the sense that people, even experts, like believe they're in there. If you do want to make it like this way, and see where it's going through, it's a little bit trickier, but it works. One of the super basic way that I do it in my own environment is basically, if you look at a thing, you can pinch and you teleport there. It's usually done at ground level, but you don't have to. So you can just look at a thing that's 2 meters high, and you teleport there, and you can climb basically up through your volume. So it entirely depends on the game mechanics that each experience is using. It's a kind of going back also to what you mentioned before. You need volition, so you need to want to go up there. And if it happens to you, usually it can be disorientating, especially if you don't have a ground, even a virtual ground. Like if your elevator doesn't look like an actual elevator, for a lot of people, that doesn't work well. So you can literally have something that's the size of a credit card, doesn't even have to be big, but where you can imagine yourself standing on top of. If you have literally nothing and you don't teleport like instantly to the higher up place, for most people it's tricky because again you like do the difference between what you're supposed to be doing and viewing and what's actually happening. And on a very brief note, also, I based on Cole's remark before, my favorite piece of content ever across any media, that's a little bit, maybe much, but in terms of at least experiential media, is probably Half-Life Alex because it ticks all those boxes. Namely, you're basically saving the world. So in terms of story, I think it's exciting. Visually, it's the best that could be done a couple of years ago. And I haven't seen much better. Yeah, it's just great. And all the, how do you say, the game mechanics, they're basically on the Half-Life engine, and the principle is just like you drop things and they fall. So it's just a physics engine, but because of this and because you manipulate things, it's just amazing. And the way the story unfolds, like you discover persona that help you learn the game, everything is, I can't wait for the next one, literally.
Just making sure your link is on our website so we can try it at any time. Hang on. There is a hand up somewhere. Mark has a hand up.
I do have a hand up. I'm just checking. Rob's off. Bye, Rob. I was before it sort of passed from thought, and because we were trying not to put things too much in the sidebar, I was going to draw a quick crosswalk to Carl's observation earlier about basically having essentially a static control that you turn that moves you along some axis. It's quite interesting, and in fact, the axis, in fact, what you see, in other words, you have a cursor in a way in front of you on an axis or something. And that can also, I just thought I'd draw the line to Ted Nelson's zigzag notion, which was doing that in lots of dimensions. Sort of think of it like a Rubik's cube. So in other words, that same metaphor works. So you can have, in a sense, a static observational cursor thing in front of you, but you can go on well as many dimensions as you like, and I just sticks for those unfamiliar with zigzag. And another sort of Ted Nelson's sort of missed and abandoned ideas that was probably a bit ahead of anyone being able to do much with it. In fact, I think my old supervisor actually made a map of the London Underground using zigzag as a way of navigating around, but I think that's one of the practical uses I've seen of it. Anyway, it's just a little connection of those two ideas. Thanks.
A quick question to Fabienne. I'm in your environment now for a minute, and it's beautiful. How do I reach things that are far away? I don't want to accidentally punch my monitor.
You can't really cheat. It's just like room scale. So if you can't grab them in this version, you might have to punch through your monitor, sadly.
For you, of course, that's worth it.
Don't do this, but yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm seeing you guys now, normal monitor overlaid the real monitor, but I'm actually on the Bora Bora beach, and Fabienne, your work is over here. And I'm doing this because of what Carl was talking about earlier, taking the real into this headset. Even though it's super not real, it's, yeah. Anyway, I'll take it back off. So more thoughts on what could possibly make the biggest wow moment. Shall we narrow it down just for fun to wow moment for a knowledge worker? Not necessarily academic, but not necessarily just a friend who doesn't care about what we call knowledge work. What could really make them go, ha? Peter.
Oh, another thing I was toying with was more of an Escher-esque kind of space. What if instead of just having the tunnels radiating out on one plane, we imagine that we were at the center of a sphere with corridors radiating out both on a roll axis and a pitch and a yaw axis, so that basically like you'd be in the middle of a sphere and you could choose to have the sphere rotate so that the corridor immediately in front of you would drop down below the horizon and another one from above would drop down into position, and then you could walk out along that dimension so that you'd be moving up diagonally, but perception-wise, you'd just be walking forward after you had the entire space spin around you to orient to where in the z-axis you wanted to be moving. And of course, that wouldn't work in real life because of gravity, but since you don't have gravity in XR, that'd become a non-issue, and everything could just basically rotate around until you were lined up. So then you could have, time being the angle that time would be depth, forward, back. Subject could be your left-right orientation, and then geography or something, who knows, could be on the vertical as it spins around. So that would give you 3 dimensions that you could explore in a linear timeline kind of fashion all at the same time.
Yeah, those navigation issues are definitely interesting. So Carl, you asked, what was the question? Wow moment for whom? And it makes me think of Doug's question of whom to augment first. I guess that's what we're thinking about here. For fun, we're using our book as the test thing for this. And I really think that the wow moment we're trying to think about is for someone who we expect might at least download our book as a PDF. Someone with a slight interest in what we do. And maybe even get it on paper if they're a friend who just want to be supportive and have no clue what this is. If that person can put the book on in the headset. And let's be clear, there are many things that can be done. It could be one article that is an entire environment that has nothing to do with the rest of the book. That wouldn't be a bad thing. It could also be how to get an overview of the book, by topic and all of that stuff, which we'll probably end up doing to some degree. But it really is, what we're trying to do here, as we talked about before, it's partly theater. Not theater in the fake sense, but theater in the getting people's emotions so they're curious about, this can be a real work environment. So does that focus the question more?
Are we trying to get them to do work? Are we trying to get them to enjoy work? Or are we trying to get them to understand that the work can be sort of meaningful somehow? They're separate things, and they can be triggered, I think, in different ways.
And that's why you see me reacting like this. That's a stressful question in the good sense. You're absolutely right. These are not the same thing. Being a software developer, I would like them to do work. Hopefully, author version 10 will be released today. There's been some Apple complaints of issues. I would love to have a really fully functioning work environment in XR. But I think that from our kind of Monday's discussion point of view, it should be more giving them, with real data, a sense that I really want to work here. But hey, that's me right now. I'm not dictating to you what kind of emotion. All I'm saying is it's fun sometimes to use a bit of time and dream, as in, how do we really want to impress our friends? That's really what it comes down to, actually. Impress our friends. Carl, tell me.
So if you want to do a demo, a prototype, and you want it to be impressive, impactful, or to linger with the person you're giving it to, you can kind of do one of two things. You can either, if you only have a small amount of time with the user or you only have a small budget, you can only make a small thing. There's one of two sort of avenues you can take, which is we're going to make the most technically impressive small little snippet of like, this is the highest possible quality of thing that we could make, and we can make more of this. So we can expand the scope. We can make more of this, but this is the sort of quality that you can expect. That this is the limits of what we can do with this. Or you can push along the other line, which is you demonstrate something to the user that gets them to think, that sort of probes them or primes them in a specific direction, that makes them ask themselves questions along the lines of, what else can we do along this same vein? What other things can we do with this tool, with this environment, with this thing? So that's the sort of academic, sort of focused push where they say, okay, well, I didn't know it could do this. And you give them that new piece of information. It doesn't have to be overly polished, but it gets them to think about what the other possibilities are. And that sort of self-directed questioning is something that will make that experience last and stick with that person.
You've all obviously seen the Foundation series, right? And if you haven't, you have to. Forget whether it's good sci-fi or original to the book, that's fine. But Carl, you're making me think a little bit of that Tesseract thing. There's an object in there you can do a thing with, and it's, multidimensional, incredible. So we may simply, because I like what you're saying, it is also very an Apple approach. Do one thing, do it ridiculously well. And it could be a knowledge object, a 3D knowledge object, whatever, and you can stretch it, pull it, do dimensional things with it. That may be very powerful. I'll think some more about that, but I have a feeling Fabienne and Mark have things. No idea where I get that feeling from. I may have you with your yellow hands. Sorry.
So it's funny because I answered your question, but then also whom to augment first. I want to augment myself first, but I want to do it inclusively. I want so that when I augment myself, others, if they want to benefit from it too. And I'm saying this because I was blown away by VR initially. First, it works when I tried it for the first time. But my second thought was pretty much right away. Like, wow, I can carve space. I can make it is virtual space, but it's still space. Like I can make a thing, a room or whatever, and because I can program, I can not necessarily make a beautiful one, but at least I can shape space. And I can do this here also in the real world, let's say, but it's going to be very different. It's definitely going to be a lot more expensive and slower and a lot of different properties. So that to me was the moment when I tried VR. I was like, wow, this is what gets me going. This is what gets me excited. I can change space very, very cheaply. I'm not saying it's easy. It's a struggle, and the results are not necessarily always aesthetically pleasing. But still, it's kind of to me that's the, let's say, blown away moment when I tried the headset. It wasn't like experiencing somebody's no matter how impressive story. It was still like an egocentric empowerment that I can shape back space again, even though virtual. It is still definitely a kind of space that I can think myself thinking inside of. I could imagine this. So that's been, let's say, the clicking moment for me. The moment where I was like, this is different. This is not just a toy. It is also a toy, and I really enjoy playing with it. But it's so much more than this.
So, in summary, Fabien, make useful stuff for us.
Well, with me first.
No, I agree with that. I strongly agree with that. I only make tools that I can use myself, which is why in the early days I could never make something for Windows. Now that's changed. Windows is a different thing. And also, I wouldn't be able to make a flight simulator. I don't know about planes. I agree with you. We should stick to our own passions. We represent a useful group of people anyway. So that's quite beautiful.
Just also to, I'll share my screen briefly. Hopefully, I'll be able to share a second time. But to expand on this, so that I don't sound probably too egoistic. Can you see my screen? Yes, no?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, I didn't. So I've made a computer this weekend, so I cheated quite a bit, but still. And it started by this. The blue part is a key from a keyboard. And why I'm showing this, first because I'm proud of it. I think that was pretty cool. It was interesting, and I'm using like the most. Lego pieces are quite cheap. The Raspberry Pi is the Pi 3, so it's quite old and thus quite cheap. And the screen, well, it's a touch screen, but you can have older screen, so it's a small one, it's quite cheap. And I show this because that's also some of the way to learn what the medium is. Of course, it's not a VR headset, but it is a screen, and you can imagine the same way a key has been done here. You could have an accelerometer, an IMU based on a plastic ball or metal ball to make contact, etc. So my point is, it's also by using the medium here. I'm using a computer to learn how a computer works. So, and this is a little video of the first design on Saturday. You can hear a little bit, maybe the key. So that's also the kind of, I hope, empowerment I have in mind. So using a computer to learn how a computer is with the cheapest kind of thing, but still modular. Like, for example, the key really works. Like if you press it, because it's connected to the Raspberry Pi, it does work. It does make a space key. But it's modular, like you can remove it, tinker with it, put it back, or you can have like 50 or 100 of them for a real keyboard. I don't recommend it because it would be gigantic, but you get the idea. So that's also the thing with VR and AR. It's like to learn how that works, and then to, again, empower to build on top of this to make more stuff, and not just like the virtual space, but bringing it back to the real one. So yeah, so a bit of convoluted, but I hope pragmatic, and I hope for others also, not just for passionate nerds.
Passionate nerds. Thank you, Fabien. Also, for all of you, if there is something you want to show, this is the community to show it, even if it's off topic for the day. Who cares? We're here to inspire each other and whatever. And Fabian, that was really, really beautiful. And annoyingly, you're making me think hardware now, which I shouldn't. So quickly, Mark, take over. Quick, quick, quick.
I was just thinking on the fact in terms of, well, whether making the excitement for oneself or someone else in the knowledge space as opposed to the entertainment space, is that I find the excitement very hard to sustain, because what normally happens is you see something, this would be really cool in this space. I could do, and then everything else is ... and it's not there. And you suddenly realize there is a massive amount, and this is the lesson I've learned out of some of the data sets I've been making recently, that the bit you thought you were dealing is but the tip of the iceberg, but without the rest of the iceberg, you just don't get that. You just don't get the whiz bang you hoped for. You get the idea of it, and obviously, if you understand the medium, you can theorize. You can imagine in your mind's eye it's there, but the delivery of it is actually a little bit harder, or more, generally more effort than perhaps we're allowing from. I mean, so in other words, we tend to get caught up essentially in devising the render space. So we draw the environment, we imagine how it looks, populated by that line we keep saying, just imagine we have all the stuff we need. But the problem is we normally don't, which means that the things we build often end up being actually less exciting than they could be. This is on a different aspect to, funnily enough, the sort of stuff, the prototyping that Fabien's doing, which is deliberately not really trying to address that. It's actually much more in the rear of the interaction. And that's sort of frustration. So you go from that initial excitement to things you can do, to then thinking, but what I really want is all the stuff that's still away behind the curtain. And I don't know the easy way to square that circle.
Fabian, please go, and then I'm going to reply to you, Carl.
No, I'll have to go in 15 minutes, so I'll do the demo now, and I'll explain. Let me know when you can see my screen, please. Yeah, super, thank you. So I'll try to mirror from the headset, not too high resolution. Hope you can still see this. So, okay. I'll refresh. And I'll explain a little bit why that is, what's happening. So you can still see my hands moving and the kind of blackboard behind.
Yep.
Super. So that for those of you who are familiar with my environment, it's the same as usual. So namely that there are pieces of text, I can grab them and I can execute them. So I grab with a right hand, the blue ball, let's say, and then I execute with the left one. I added some billboarding and some shortcuts like on my hand. What you see in front of you, the gray board, not the white board or blackboard, the goal is this afternoon or this morning, I went to walk around the park and I spoke and I got a bunch of text for a bigger piece of text. And a lot of it was not so good, some of it was okay, so I need to reorganize it. So what I did is this board, I will have to step back a bit so I can have it. A bit closer, I can stand, I can move them. So that's the usual, let's say, things, but I have my blackboard, whiteboard at home, or wherever I want actually, just at home. And what I can do now, if everything works well, because demo time, is if I can grab the URL here. Some of you might have noticed that it's a little bit of a long URL. I can share it with anybody on my local network. If that thing goes away, that's the UI for if that thing goes away, you can try. So I can remove the headset. So let's imagine that I spend, let's say, a couple of minutes working on the headset. Now, if I click here, I have the same position as the one you saw before. So let's say the whiteboard is coherent with what I saw. The problem is it's still in 2D. So I made a little pure 2D version. So that's the same content that was hidden behind, but into the perfectly black ones. And I can move them around because I don't want to lose their affordances from XR to 2D. So I've flattened, let's say, the blackboard. The position is behind or above. You can see here, like this is the text. I mean, I hope you can see the text is behind the other one.
Very well.
And what I have on the left here, a bit hidden, is the data. So if I do my favorite text editor, I have the position also, so that I can use those bits, take back the JSON and flatten it to import it to PowerPoint or whatever in order to get that result of that blackboard. So it's updated live. I can get that again and apply it again. And the hope behind all this, I'll stop sharing, is that I want this tiny piece of hardware to bring me a whiteboard wherever I want, however I want, so I can organize those ideas. But I don't want those to be stuck in there because not all of you have headset, and sometimes I just don't want the headset. So the idea is the transition, let's say, back to 2D, and with a little piece of JSON on the left, back to any kind of software. I don't really care. I was thinking about the JSON Canvas recent specification, so I can bring it to Remarkable or whatever sketching tools. So yeah, that was today. The goal here was, again, how do I organize my thought when I have a larger piece of text to write? And again, going from speech to the text, and then the text spatially organized across.
You need to stop talking. I need to praise you. That's amazing. That is exactly what. Okay, I'm glad you're here, Andrew. Obviously, I'm always glad you're here, but particularly for this. This kind of transportation is just absolutely ridiculously useful and important and crucial. Yeah, the big smile, big physical applause. Yes, this is really, really important. And the piece that I sent to you today, please all read it. Because it asks some of the questions, and what Fabian is doing here is offering the beginnings of answers. The virtual space will only be connected how we choose to connect it. Oh, I wish I wrote that. But you're demonstrating one very important way to do that. Did you say you had to leave soon, Fabian?
Yes, in 10 minutes.
Okay, so then just briefly, I'm also going to present something because it maps onto what you're saying quite literally. I put an image in the chat here. This is an old app that I'm thinking of recreating, and maybe in XR and hopefully open. The idea is, thank you, Peter. So the idea, this was an iPad, an iPhone app, that there was you could rotate it, zoom in and out, all of that stuff. Obviously not Google Earth level. It was a single high quality, oh, that's very weird. I got a pop-up from the Apple website. The idea was to teach geography. So if you touch, like in the image you see here, someone's touched on that sea, and you get the boundary and you get the name, right? That plus another bit where if you chose to touch the name, you will get a graph showing the statistics of the sea compared to all the other seas in the world. Very simple. But then within some of the discussions I'm thinking here, maybe we should also look at a physical world thing, but to provide the means where it's very easy for people to choose what to overlay, right? To have things, everyone's looked at globes, but even now I cannot see any good globes on the App Store. They're all so much stuff on them, or very cartoonish. So, we talk about timeline. I'm very happy to release everything that I have for this if somebody wanted to work on it. But imagine, you see where it says Caribbean Sea, if you could pull that out or push that in, or pull it out to an extent and put it somewhere else, you could quite literally have annotations as of the Earth. If we could do an open and easy addressability to a relatively okay resolution, you should be able to just put text in a normal document, have a link that can go to Google Earth if you want, of course. But if something like this is open, like a Wikipedia, open it and you can compare places. I think that relates very much, Fabian, to you're in XR space and now you're in 2D space. I just wanted to have it mentioned before Fabian left. Andrew, what Fabian showed is something you can integrate if we decide that's the way to go, probably, right?
Probably not his code, most likely. We'd have to look at it.
I mean, the
There's a
JSON, the
chance.
data, the data.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, we're working on passing data. Fabian and I were originally doing that quite a ways back,
Yeah.
when we were working with the map space. But then that got cut from the project. So I think Fabian probably still has that code somewhere. But I'm trying to get it working again with the save system. Assuming the team keeps going in that direction. We'll have to see.
I think a lot of things got cut or moved because, quite simply, ACM conference, we just needed to show a thing. Now it's the time to make sure the thing connects with other things.
Yeah, and obviously we have some time to experiment once again. But then we do have the symposium. So we're gonna have to decide what we want to nail down for that as well. Not immediately, but we'll have to be thinking. That way it's not such a rush like the last one.
Yeah, I mean, just in terms of providing a space for or a frame for the symposium, obviously visually it'll be what you have. Hopefully it'll be connected to the book content itself. And also I can very easily imagine the kind of thing Fabienne showed where we will have the opportunity, as we looked at in the very beginning, of having text around the room, that the text has some meaning. Maybe if the text comes from Fabienne World, you touch one and you can see it comes from Fabienne World. Or maybe it's a keyword, that kind of stuff we need to experiment with. But of course, that's another way to make the space extremely messy. So we will need to, yeah, provenance is the French sounding word. Fabien.
Yeah, I mean, of course, we'll always want the French sounding one. Also, to connect a bit, like Cole mentioned, the challenge of having no user base, basically, not to say it that harshly, but that's a problem, which is also why I'm saying, yeah, I want to do it for myself first. One of the motivation also for the Blackboard thing experiment, besides being useful itself, is because I think indeed creating a window for others to at least collaborate, not necessarily come into the XR space, but at least have some affordance back to potentially collaborate is important. To self, again, I don't always want to be in the headset, and I'm starting to think more and more that this it's the only way, basically. It's the only way to being able to not necessarily can grow the user base, but collaborate with others. And one of the harsher way that I've come to accept this is the dynamic lens. Some of you might be aware of it. It's the setup where you have a video projector, a camera, you do computer vision on track things. So there's an alternative called full computer. I had a setup at home, so that's a button. And when you push on it, it brings the two PCs together. So it's very low tech, but that works. It's a button off or on rather, and then off. And why do I show this? It's because I'm thinking more and more that the knowledge space has to be shared across all those devices. And it's also something that I heard Dini mention quite a bit, and a lot of us like. We want all our information to be accessible across any device. We don't really care even how it's done, but in practice, you start to think about something, you should be able to pick it up from whatever device you own. Like it's part of your space. But also, if that thing, this piece of information you want to manipulate, has a place, so it should be there and remain available there. If it has no place, you don't really care. If it's just a file system, let's say it's not. But if you have a desktop, like a computer desktop, and you put it there somewhere, then you can't lose its position. And I'm thinking more and more that all those, especially when you have a system like Dynamic Land, when you have moved your document on your physical space and it's there, should remain there, but also accessible spatially to other devices. So you can imagine something like Dynamic Land with a video projector on the table, and then you see the content also from something that is spatial. So that's kind of the, let's say, extension of that just Blackboard that is in the end just flattened to 2D. But what if you have all those physical space and you can also interact with them through it? So yeah, I have a couple of Git issues on the topic. I'll put that here also for reference because I think it's something we have to consider where the pieces of knowledge we put in space they have to be, and then how we can keep on interacting with them across devices.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And because you got to go, I want to remind you all of this. This is the map view in Author, right? The size is fine for me to read on a 27-inch screen, not ideal. It's based on, actually, I'll show you this way. You have your control click on something, you can choose to define, edit, select similar, or assign as a person or whatever, right? This is a very rough one. As you can see, it's an absolute mess. But if I do define, I write the relationship of it. There's no reason it couldn't have a Fabienne field in here below that is, just literally stuff, that kind of metadata. If we have somewhere to put it, by the way, this is, if I design it as a person, it becomes italic. And this is super simple. I would absolutely love to be able to have my world go into Fabienne world in a different view, and of course also in Underworld. But of course they would have different attributes. Like right here, this looks like it would be great in 3D. It's an absolute mess the way we're looking at it right now. So if just in terms of impressing people and making people happy, I would absolutely love to be able to be in a highly interactive world that has all kinds of keywords and things like that. Yes. Young man's come home from school. Oh, sorry, I haven't shaved. Anyway, thank you, Fabienne, for bringing up both your system and the interconnects for it, so to speak. Oh, let me just ask, before Fabienne goes, ask all of you, how important do you feel in the community that we should all work on things where stuff like what Fabienne has in a virtual environment and in a traditional environment can be moved around on a scale of 1 to 10? Can you all just type in briefly? I mean, I would.
Around.
Please repeat, Fabienne. I couldn't hear that.
I don't understand what you mean by move around or moved around here.
Yeah, no. What I mean is, how important is it for us to develop a way where we can be in what Andrew's building, Fabienne's building, or something like that? I'm building in 2D. Do stuff with pieces of concepts of knowledge, whatever you might want to call it, and then click a button, so to speak, and be in one of the other environments.
So like data portability or?
Yes, exactly what you showed, Fabienne, to go from your XR environment into 2D, but that we can all do it with our own stuff. How highly would you, as opposed to, Carl, good question, as opposed to having a great interaction only in one environment, but then not being able to take off your headset and continue, or going in a different headset world?
So just like I work in WebXR because I don't trust that headset or any other headset. I want to be able to keep on using that on whatever platform. So it's the same for the data, not just the code. So to me, it's, yeah, of course it has to be. I just did quick JSON because it's the easiest way, but ideally something documented. That's why I mentioned JSON Canvas, for example. So something like a 3D version of JSON Canvas. I mean, there are different formats for this. I'm not sure which winner will emerge, if any. But as long as it's a documented format, that I think that's a good place to start. Documented, of course, is good, and ideally like no how do you say, no fees, like not MP4 kind of consortium that controls whatever.
And Carl gives a 5, which is funny. We'll have to hear more about that in a minute. But I'm just thinking about something as simple as I can imagine on demo day, both Future of Text and for the rest of my life, sitting someone down in front of my software. They do this stuff. Oh, how cool, blah, blah, blah. And I say, now put it in a headset. When they put it in a headset, all of it will be there as it was, just bigger, with one big difference. And that is, if it's manipulated in XR, it's on a separate plane. And it's remembered where it is, so it's proper spatial. But all the stuff that's just been added in the meanwhile, quite literally, is in the background. So if something has been manipulated in Fabienne's world or in the Sloan underworld, you can still deal with it, but then you deal with it only on the XY axis when you're in my basic software. But it retains that bit of stuff. I think that would be literally mind-blowing because I deal with it in my way for my users, Fabian in his way for his users. That's the whole point. But if these tiny entities are self-describing enough, and it could even be plain text, it doesn't have to be hidden in some special way. I think that would be really mind-blowing. Really, that's what I think. Anyway, Peter, before we get to you, Carl, why only 5?
So currently, in current day, in current year, if you have an application or an experience that is available on the headset and a bunch of other platforms, particularly PC and phone, the headset always loses because people either don't have a headset, don't want to buy one. There's physiological eccentricities of that hardware as far as eye strain, resolution, audio, whatever it is, battery life, whatever it is. There's a bunch of extra stuff in the negative column for the headset. So if the experience itself is not fundamentally different or much better on the headset, then the headset is always going to lose because the other two mediums are more familiar and more efficient and with less drawbacks, with less sort of negative aspects for the user. So if you're planning to make an application be cross-platform, inherently you're going to spread that development time and your budget a little thinner in order to have and code and check and test all of the cross-platform operabilities. So you have to build each one of those applications, not entirely from scratch, but you have to change things about them to make sure that they work. And the quality of the headset specific part of that application is going to suffer a non-zero amount from you having to split your attention between the other one or two platforms. And so in current day and current year, when headset applications, native headset applications already aren't hitting the quality bar to vastly outshine their drawbacks, it almost seems like a complete waste of time to add headset as an option to an app that you can use on your phone or on your PC. Not because it's not a good idea, not because it's not that this would be a good way for people to dip their toes into the possibility of using a headset. If a tool they already are using or already know how to use, it's like, oh, you can also do this on a headset. People are like, oh, cool, I could try that. But if it's not compelling when they get to it, it's going to be a mark against the headset, which it really doesn't need any help with right now. So I'm all for interoperability and cross-platform applications and the ability to migrate data in and out of different things. But in current day and current year, that is requiring a sacrifice on the main pain point axis for why headsets already aren't seeing as much adoption as we would like them to.
Those are fair points, but as an aside, the experience that Andrew has built is very different from what you can do in 2D, and it is important that it does use real data. So it already has interoperability built in for that level. And what we're talking about now is the idea of putting on a thinking cap and having a larger space, which is something I think we can talk more about, but I have a feeling Mark has something more clever to say than I will.
I don't know about more clever. So the answer to your question is, if this is a consequence-free world and we just want unicorns and rainbows, sign me up for a 10, because somebody else will do all the work and it's fine. So yeah, 10. But pragmatically, I'm sort of lost in the middle because I think it's the wrong question to ask. It gives you a false dopamine hit and you get little from it. It's not that it's a bad thing to do, but you just don't get much meaningful from it. And I reflect on all the hard work that's gone into, Andrew's programming in the last year for the stuff we've done, and found that, things have turned out to be somewhat more complicated than we thought. And I was also reflecting on the fact that sitting open on my desk is, you were talking about reusing stuff. Well, I'm sitting working on a Tinderbox document that I've been working on for 10 years, and I'm doing all the things that you're talking about, just not in XR at the moment. But in terms of data reuse, but the amount of different ways I have to reformat the thing, because there isn't behind the screen a magic thing which somebody else has written that makes all this magically just have all the information you need in the format you want when you want. Well, no, you can't. The thing is, you can't just magic past this, and this is where I think it's interesting for us to look at this.
He just did. He literally did, right? So if for me to be compatible with his system, I just need to be compatible with how he went between XR and 2D. And he did it as a JSON. I should be able to parse that JSON. So Fabien really has done a lot of that already.
Yeah, but so I don't see what the novelty is in that. We've been doing that for decades. So, I mean, the fact that you're passing some JSON that is interpreted in XR is not novel. I'm sort of confused as to really what we're addressing here then.
What we're addressing is the notion of, I don't expect, even in 10 years, I don't expect the people to use a headset all day, but I do expect in 5 years for most people to have a headset. So I really think of the headset as being a thinking cap. You go in there when you want to do specific type of work, for obviously entertainment and all that, but for specific kind of work. And the number one thing you have in the headset that is obvious is a very large working space. So if you can start with a simple thing of, you're working on your laptop or traditional computer, you have this knowledge space that you yourself have made. There are aspects of this, that, and the other, and you literally run out of space. Put on your headset, through clicking a button, you now have a bigger space. I think that in itself is extremely compelling. I've spent, as you know, Mark, a lot of time working on the interactions for that, as in how you select things, how you move things, all of that stuff. And then the next level, of course, is the 3D aspect of it, which of course I don't have on this. So I'm just wondering if we could do something like, if it starts out in a 2D app, and then you put on the headset and you click through all the JSON stuff, that it has it on one plane. I don't know what I mean by plane, by the way, to make that clear. You start doing things, but when you then close the headset, put it down, that spatial information is also transmitted, even though it isn't visible on the 2D screen. It's just to be able to go back and forth. Of course, it's technically feasible, but I think
just quickly before Peter pops in, this is a problem that's been sort of known about for a while and looked at, and there is a problem with just collapsing 3D into 2D spaces for the convenience, because in our minds that's magic thing happens, go from 3D to 2D. It's actually complicated because you end up with a lot of mess, and this is one of the things you yourself have reflected on in your map, and this is there are other sort of caucuses elsewhere dealing with sort of things like spatial maps who've tracked across this regularly, and this is a known problem. It just in the same way that time data is lumpy, it's inconvenient and it's annoying, but it's lumpy, and therefore the things that we want to build that are useful have to address the reality of that, because we can't keep saying, well, imagine if it all works, because all then we're doing is we're doing graphic design, we're building the render space. And it's a Potemkin village and everything behind it.
It's not a Potemkin village
set up to make it work.
Okay, I know you have a dislike towards visual design first.
No, I don't. That's totally unfair. I just explained what I meant. I just meant that when I said that we were emphasizing on the end of the graphical design, that doesn't mean it's wrong. What I mean is that we're doing the design. We're only doing part of the design. We're concentrating on the sort of endorphins, on the look and feel of the thing, which is powerful and complicated and skilled stuff. But there's things that lie behind it. And if we don't,
Mark, my turn. You don't need to defend that. We've had this discussion many times on our different perspectives. I designed the interface, and the system needs to support it. That's my approach, and it's different, and it's okay to have different approaches. What I'm saying here, and this is also a bit related to Carl's sidebar here, these media all have their strengths and weaknesses, obviously, and as we talked about in the very beginning of the talk, sometimes reading a physical book is much better than reading a digital book. So, that's absolutely fine. The benefits of working in an XR environment really is spatial. And what Andrew has built, I believe, is actually useful, and you can do things in there that you cannot do on a mobile. You can't really do on a desktop either, and I think we can expand that. So you're talking about for XR to win, the experience has to be stellar. I think you may want to modify that to be the experience has to be stellar for what it purports to do, right? Because of course, putting on the headset and so on, these are inconveniences, no question. So once you're in the headset, you're not trying to optimize for reading on paper just to be joking to kind of polarize it. Of course, you agree with me on that. Yes, Peter, that's a book you missed in the beginning. Material World, Ed Conway, really good. Right. So all I'm saying is that when you're in the headset, to be able to, whose book is The Secret of Life?
I think it's not quite out yet. It's just been published on Unbound, but it's Secret Life of Lego.
Great. I was just looking at Philip Ball's How Life Works, which is another thing. So what I'm really saying here is reading someone else's knowledge graph is often a bit problematic because you don't often have titles and so, but making your own can be useful as part of the process. And if you're going to have stuff in a headset that you can't take out, in a way it's a bit artificial because you can do things and learn things, and if you can't take it with you, it doesn't fit a workflow quite literally, right? So I do agree with you, Carl, that a kind of a knowledge space in XR would have to be very, very good. And okay, Peter, I'm going to show something, but if you have a quick comment, please go ahead. But if it's a quick one on the same topic, otherwise, do you mind waiting? Okay, right. So this is just kind of case in point. So this is a mess. This is a test document. It literally is a mess. But I've spent quite a lot of time on the little interactions, like lower left-hand corner, what you're going to see, right? So if you want to select all persons, you select, that's how you select. Now I've selected all people, and I can, of course, move them, and I can do things like this. I can do layouts, and the layouts are available lower right-hand corner, where you see these kinds of things, right? This has taken me years to get the logic right. It's very simple. It's not very fancy at all. But the point of it is, if you're going to be clicking through each single person, it's going to be messy, right? So I do think there's some of the things learned here that somehow can go into our wider environment. We have looked at some of it before, of course, in our Sloan discussions. Wouldn't be the same. Maybe we use the hand menu because we don't have a keyboard, we don't have a window frame, all of that stuff. But Carl is absolutely right. The experience would have to be good, really, really good. I'm just concerned about doing something in XR, this amazing workspace, all kinds of knowledge. You take your headset off and you almost have to take a screenshot to remember it, you know. That's basically my key thing. And then, of course, in the next step, if we were to focus on such a thing, first would be probably the 360 like we have now. And then imagine if we could do an AR version where you could use the walls in your room. Obviously, that might be useful. This is something Peter's talked about many times, Memory Palace, in your actual house. But then how about if you could collapse it into a sculpture so it becomes a ball and you're on the outside? Right, these are the kinds of transformations that can't happen anywhere else. Would it be useful or useless? I have no idea. But if it's your own actual data, I think it'll have a very real starting point value. Peter, and then Carl's going to tell me whether I convinced him or not.
Yeah, I wonder if you could get a multi-room boundary in the Quest headset. So far, I've only been in one room, but I wonder if you could, like walk through a hallway into another room and then have a few of them linked up, and then get a virtual space that can map to those volumes in your house, and then move into the virtual space. Other thoughts there, Jermaine. In the sidebar, I dropped a link to a executable built by the Bun JavaScript engine, which will generate four-word identifiers. So there's basically a mnemonic ID that's pronounceable and memorizable, so it could be exchanged over a telephone, email, or any other medium. I'm playing with that in my code. The downside to the Bun executables is that they come in at over 50 megabytes for just a one-line hello world, but you do have the JavaScript engine bundled along with any libraries that you're relying on for the executable. So actually, that size compared to an Electron app really isn't all that unreasonable. I also wanted to mention that the latest version of Zotero now supports a web server that can be connected to and expose an API for accessing the bibliographic database in the program. And what they were hoping was that other apps on the Mac would be able to be talking to that locally inside of the machine. So that could open up all sorts of integration possibilities. Then I started thinking how the latest version of the Quest software lets you have a couple apps running at the same time. So I wonder if it would be possible to have a conventional 2D interface running in one window while you were inside of a 3D experience on the Quest that was being driven by the interactions in the web browser that's running inside of it. So that might get around the fact that the 3D libraries aren't natively supporting a fully interactive web. So in that sort of a scenario, you could have the 3D environment tell the server over a web connection or a WebSocket connection or whatever, it really doesn't matter, what that four-word phrase corresponded to, and you'd be able to start exchanging larger blocks of data, but just using short phrases as the key instead of having to type in long, lengthy URLs. Because the beauty of the four-word phrase is that you can remember it, and you don't even have to be connected. You can tell someone verbally, and then when they get back to their computer, they can type in those 4 words, and assuming everything has correct, valid spelling, it makes it nice, easy to memorize, and very resistant to mistakes. Because if you're trying to use any kind of a unique global user ID that's a string of numbers or randomized symbols in order to compress the data space, the chance of an error in transcription is horrendously high. So that's basically where my work's going at the moment.
A lot of issues, Peter. Thank you. When it comes to Zotero and APIs and stuff, absolutely useful if you want to look into that and make it accessible for our world, unquestionably. Andrew, can you turn on the audio so we can say hi to Deanie?
I do have the audio on. Yes, she can hear you.
Oh, okay. Oh, you had the other way around. Deanie, we only got to see you. Can we see you again properly? Actually, Andrew, you're on a laptop, right? Do you mind showing everyone how insanely cool Deanie's lab is?
Hi, everybody.
Hi.
Who's here today? Carl Schmirk, Mark. Hi, Mark. Chris. Hi, Chris. Peter. Hello. Always charming to see you. Hi, everybody.
Fabian was here for quite a while and did some demos. Brandel was here for a bit because he's at some kind of a web conference. So he was a bit busy, but yeah, it's good. But Andrew, if Deanie doesn't mind, can you show us a little bit of the lab? It's so cool with all those Macs.
Let's do this.
Yeah, look at that. Yeah, this is, and so Deanie, how much of this is in relation to all your Macs across all the different rooms you have on campus? It's just very impressive.
Oh, yeah. Say that again, Frodo.
So how much, compared to your other rooms on campus, how much is in this room? As in, how many computers do you have?
I have 85 total, and these are about, I'd say, maybe a third of what I have, and they all work. And it's not, I mean, it was really funny. I was at an event this past week, and I had given a tour to a principal at a local high school. And he said, "Oh, yeah, I visited your little museum. It's on your campus." And I started laughing. I said, "You mean my research lab?" No, it's not a museum. And so all of these work, and we use them for preservation purposes, for textual analysis, basic analysis projects, development. We're getting ready to reconstruct David Kolb's really famous hypertext essay called Hypertext is Resistance. And so we're using it for looking at the original version to recreate it for the contemporary computer. So we do a lot of that kind of work in here. And we're building exhibitions. We'll be building the Jean-Pierre Bach exhibition, which is going to be opening in Paris on June 12th. And we're building the online exhibition site for it. So we do a lot of that kind of projects.
Yeah, just super cool space. And for those who are going to the conference, maybe you'll get to see it.
If you're nice, if you're good. Yeah, the university will be closed that week because it's Thanksgiving starting, well, Friday afternoon, everybody kind of hauls out of here at 3 o'clock. And the university shuts down for a whole week for Thanksgiving. And then we come back for a week before classes shut down entirely for winter. It's insane. So anyway, yeah, but the lab, I have 3 rooms associated with the lab. This room is called the reading room. I have archival space with over 105 boxes of physical archives that go with a lot of the art that I collect for the Next, which is the museum that we maintain and built. And then I have a space that's the video and sound studio. And in the back of that place are the rest of my computers and a lot of peripherals and odds and ends that we need for the kind of work we do. I've been doing this now for 30 plus years, but this lab is now in its 13th year. So pretty exciting.
Yeah, it is very impressive.
Thank you. It's been my life. And now I got to figure out how we can save and preserve VR projects.
Yep.
That's next. In fact, it was funny because this morning I was some folks up in Montreal have a lab, and they reached out to me about partnering with them on how to preserve XR, VR, AR projects. And I said, let's go for it. So we're interested.
Oh, that's very cool. We've been talking about many things today. Some of it was, being inspired by the fact that we have a book. What would be cool to show the book in XR, that kind of discussion. And then Fabian did a demo of the spatial scaffolding that, of course, you know very well, of how he can have text here, there, and blah, blah. And then he is in a 2D environment. He can open it up and it's still at least XY, missing the Z. And that was inspirational for thinking about how we can have information integrated. So yeah, it's been a good chat today. And next week, I hope you can be here. We're going to be talking about space and XR. What is it?
I can't be here because I'll be in Stuttgart. I leave on Saturday for the event in Stuttgart, which I'm presenting. I'm doing the keynote on Monday morning.
Oh, okay, fair enough.
So I'll be coming back in time to teach, huh?
Will it be streamed on the web? We'd love to be able to watch it.
I don't think so, but thanks for asking. I'll check and see, but I don't think so. But it's really cool because Scott Retberg is giving the keynote the next day. So on Monday, he's Tuesday. He's talking about AI. I'm talking about the projects, the preservation work that we're doing. So the museum and that kind of stuff we're building. It's exciting.
Try to get someone to record it. Try to get someone to record it. Maybe you can post it later.
Okay, that's great. Thank you, Peter, for asking. Yeah, and I fly in at 12:10 on Wednesday. Holly's picking me up at the airport, and then I'm coming straight to class. Oh, somebody's coming to see me. Hang on a second.
What is the event? Did anyone catch the name of the event?
Something exciting in Stuttgart.
Andrew, can you type the event that Ina's going to present at if you know the name of it, so we can see?
I don't know. I don't know the name. I'll get it from Deanie. She just is meeting with someone.
Yeah. So on the sidebar here, there's a discussion of NODA, which we had high hopes for, and then Mark went in and it was a bit messy, and it isn't easy to take things in and out. I do think it would be incredibly useful to offer up a very simple, let's call it a protocol for taking things between XR and flat. Even if nobody can ever make it perfect, I think if we start just doing it and other people can pick up on it, it may be very useful.
I find Noda to be interesting. In a way, it's like 3D Visio, it's box and line, but you have the same problem as alluding to earlier, is that you're working back from your imagination of what things look like, rather than building out from the information you have. Bye, Andrew. I don't want to labour the point, but it just what it shows is how immature the tools are in this space, which isn't a surprise, and actually how much harder the problem is, because the sort of stuff that Freud's been sort of talking about with maps. This is stuff doing 10, 15 years ago in Tinderbox. So I mean a different app, but exactly the same issues, problems being tracked over. Creating the information isn't particularly hard. Creating enough information at a meaningful way at the right speed and the right granularity turns out to be a lot harder. That's where the thing falls apart. Witness the fact that I think we've been talking about making a timeline of information from the book for 3 years. I've made lots of data, which is the bit I know how to do, but we haven't built anything because turns out it's actually quite hard to build timelines. And most of the libraries that are around are pretty uncompelling because they're really designed to show sort of here's me aged 1 through 10 with a nice snapshot and a couple of bits of text. They're not actually really designed to take an unknown shape of data, stick it onto a time axis, and then do cool stuff with it, which is what we imagine doing, and I'm sure we can do. But there's a real chicken egg problem that until you have enough data in the space, you can't really see how it looks. This is what I learned with Noda. I put what I thought was something fairly simple in Noda, and it turned out to be a right royal pain in the backside. And I was doing something the app wasn't really designed to do. As I say, it's basically a 3D box and line tool. And it's pretty cool. I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, it's nice, and the people are still working on it, and there are people doing fun stuff with it. Is it doing the sort of things we're talking about? No, not really. And I can't remember there was another VR tool. Was it called Transverse Space or something? And I thought that was going to be interesting, but that wandered off into the website's now a picture of AI generated pictures, all designed by Voxel Alliances. So they didn't seem to really be thinking about information exploration at all, which is sort of one of the goals that we keep circling around the edge of. And I don't know. I mean, I know I probably sound like a squeaky wheel about the missing information, but what I've learned the hard way over 3 decades in different contexts is that there's a limit to what you can do without representative data.
Yeah, it's got to be real data, and it could be your own data. We have to wrap up. It's time now, but I mean, I do think that if we could do the very no, I don't have an obsidian, but that's a good question. Please read Carl's comment. I do think that if we do something as simple as just sharing this stuff, then we can start adding a little bit to it. One of the things that definitely want to add is that some of these entities can be linked to another entire map. So you can start nesting. So you can have, on the left in your workroom, all your different projects presented in this way, but visually you can see if you open this, now you're in a different one. It's incredibly simple. This is the most obvious thing people have talked about for VR, AR, XR, all of it. No one's done it. I think we should have a crack at it because sometimes obvious is hard, but if you have the enthusiasm, maybe it can happen. Any final thoughts before we adjourn for a week? Well,
a very quick one is I'd love you to say what you think having a crack at it looks like, given the recent conversation, because we can keep imagining it, but what practically do you think that means?
I can tell you exactly that. You know very well my tool, because thank you, you've helped me create it. So I'm thinking about that as a basic starting point. In fact, I'll show you all because it's so simple. Let me just open something here. So imagine starting with something, here we go. So you have text, you can move it about, you can define it, and in my world, the definition is very simple. You have this is a, which is a tag, of course, and then you can write whatever you want about it, whatever it might be. But if you write something else, like if I write it's not Italy, say Italy becomes bold because it also exists as another node. This is the most basic, simple thing. And then imagine below, blah, 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 something like that, right? Just coordinates, doesn't even have to be hidden. Maybe we have a nice little, even call it Fabienne space. And then he's given whatever it might be. You know, but also imagine if he has another one that is date and time when it was made, whatever it is, a really simple, maybe we even do a kind of a bracket system. So it's easy to parse out stuff. Because one of the real benefits, I think, you should be able to add in your own environment, in your own software, a ton of metadata, but it should still open up somewhere else with the basics. So here, for instance, it could be that only XY is read by my software. Maybe I also care about date and time. You know, so if we do something this simple, and it could be all kinds of things, because as those of you who are familiar with my visual meta, I don't mind the metadata being visual at the end of something, provided it's truly useful for the user. Same thing here. There's nothing wrong with having the basic definition nice and clean, and then below you have tons of stuff that, you know, once you know what it is, you know it's being used by different systems.
But Fred, what's the novelty here? Because nothing you've showed, and I don't mean this to talk harshly, but nothing that you've showed is sort of in any way new. So all these sort of things of the nostrums you've shown, the only thing that isn't built out is the system that actually uses the data. So the data, as you said, yeah, you can put as much data as you like behind it. You can you can have an infinite amount of metadata sitting in the background. The challenge part, it seems to me, is making the meaningful transition of state across different applications or different environments. And that, I don't know, that's not the way people are designing. So the Noda example is a good case. So someone has done something that looks on the face of it like it could be the 3D version of your map, but it isn't. It's a box and line tool in
right. So to reply to that, because we all have to go, and thank you for the question. I really don't care about novelty. I care about utility. You know, don't forget that the biggest update in Author is the fact that some text can now be orange, which is ridiculous, right? But it became actually useful. Same here. Novelty isn't the point. I just want a robust way to move stuff about. And then hopefully, as long as it's open and clear and anybody can use it, not just from an intellectual perspective, intellectual property, but also from it's actually accessible for a programmer to figure it out because it's clean. I think that in itself is important to make it super simple. And I would, you know, I have dreams of what to put in here. I want these entities to be able to contain full LLMs. I want to be able to have one of these things represent a philosopher, perhaps. So when it's in a space, it could be able to interact with all the entities in the space and say, according to my AI brain, I think so-and-so about that and that. You know, there are extensions for things, but you can't have things in a space without knowing where they are in the space and how they relate. So it is the most obvious thing, but you know what? Nothing has in my life stopped me from trying to do the obvious. I mean, text is the most obvious thing. And look, we're all spending years and years figuring out how to move to the next sentence, right?
So along that line of the sort of question I posted in the sidebar, are we more interested in like building an XR visualization out of like a 2D data set, or are we more interested in a tool that will let you build or organize a data set natively in XR? Because those are very different things.
I think both, but maybe as different things. I could imagine some of the experiments around our book being the first, because it is a data set. And I would very much like to work for year 2 on Sloan in the authoring. Because one thing, and I'm very glad we're going over time here, because you and Mark are both pushing me. And so I could imagine that we say, for instance, to the Sloan Foundation that yes, authoring in XR, but not to make a document, but to make a space. Potentially right now, I could imagine that what we hand in, so to speak, at the end of the second year is this virtual space, and they get to experience it in different ways. And I think that could be huge, especially, Carl, if we go back to what you said earlier, the three things, if there can be a narrative. Because one of the things we can add in XR is an overlay of a narrative, like, okay, this is my knowledge space. However, this means this, and then there could even be a virtual hand, a virtual person, as we talked about in the community, doing a guide. This is this and that is that. But that only has real value if it is not just that. The one thing in the entire world that I really hate when in our work is the CD-ROM ghetto of information. I despise it. Right? It can be nice if you're reading a specific book, but my soul is a tool maker. So if you can't put other information in there, it's really barren and horrible. That's just me. I'm not saying everyone should be like that. But therefore, to be able to make a knowledge sculpture, whatever that is, we have no idea, to be honest, I think. We all have inklings. And I think Mark's experience with Noda is really important, because that was an experiment and it worked for certain things, but not for everything.
I like Carl's point about the design of the data space, because I think you've nailed it. The problem is it sounds heretical at the moment to say that you write and you don't start writing with a rectangular white space on a screen or a piece of paper on a desk, because we're so inured to that. But essentially, what falls out from what you're saying is the authoring, the narrative is just one of the affordances, one of the outputs of the design space. And I think you hit the nail on the head. The tools we don't have at the moment is to design the space. In other words, it might sound odd, but you write your story, but you don't start with I left home one day at the top left-hand corner of a white rectangle. You start thinking about all the bits you need and the way it's going to live in the various environments you want it in. And we're going to have to learn to do that, because I don't think that's a natural way of looking at things for all of us. And for people coming from all sorts of different specialism areas, they'll all find an acute discomfort with it, because it won't be what they're used to. Just in the same way that from the technical side, there is a division of church and state between data and stuff like text. Well, that's really a bit moot now, because it's all ones and zeros underneath. And why do we do that? Well, it's just the data that used to live in a database back in the day. Well, it doesn't have to now. So a lot of these sort of divisions are now going away. So what I see, in what Fred was showing with the map is exactly what you've said. Is how do you turn the authoring from writing on a paper or on a screen, line at a time, word at a time, into actually designing, writing and generating meaningful data that allows your narrative to exist in the environments it needs to in a meaningful way.
So on that note, just want to bring up the discussion Mark and Chris Gutteridge and me had very much in the beginning of my PhD, which is a long, long time ago, was about how knowledge is multidimensional and academic argument is linear. To an extent, a sentence has to be linear. So to be able to take the knowledge, shape it into a linear argument, and then to explode it again is going to be very important. So I can imagine that is key to this. If we then look at the linear as being akin to a narrative, here's the narrative, we collapse it down to this, we explode it to this, but it doesn't have to be a column linear narrative. It can be many different kinds of a narrative. But despite my incredible gratitude for you being here and opening your brains, I got to run. And I thank you and I thank you. If you have anything to write on this before next week, please do. And
Are we meeting Wednesday?
Wednesday is finishing some Sloan coding things. So it's very much focused around Andrew's work. If you guys would like to join, you are welcome. But it is basically supporting Andrew in what he's doing for the specific things to finish off the year. So it's very, very constrained. But it's the same time on Wednesday, same bat channel. So see you soon at some point. And again, if you want to email or whatever, I'm here. I'm very, very grateful. And I think today was very fruitful indeed. So thanks, guys. Bye for now.
Bye bye.